Hey, Blue Jays fans, Series 1 in the books, and the Jays get the split with the Baltimore Orioles. Cole Whiston, Rob Pentalman here to discuss all things Blue Jays after Series 1 is in the books. Let's get into it right now.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Blue Jays Center.
Bautista drives it deep left field. Gone!
The sickest Toronto Blue Jays podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Rob, if I told you the Jays would get out-homered 10-3, Max Scherzer would go 3 innings in his first Jays start in the big leagues. The game 1, Jose Barrios would be a shell of himself and put up a 2022 opening day performance. You probably wouldn't have thought that we were going to walk out with a series split against the Baltimore Orioles, but we did, and that is thanks to Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett and Bo Bichette. But we'll start with the two pitchers because I think they produced what we needed in both of those games, and I'll let you start on those two.
Before we even get into the specific X's and O's of things, I just want to get your thoughts as well on just how good it is to have baseball back. I know for me personally, right off the bat in 4 days, we've gone through the roller coaster of emotions. We had that horrendous opening day performance, which, by the way, may not be the worst thing because we've seen this team the last few years have great opening day performances and then not followed up the rest of the 161. Let's hope we get some reverse magic there. A great win on Friday. As you mentioned, Kevin Gausman pitched really neat and tidy. Good ball game. We won 8-2. Rough one yesterday. We have the news that Scherzer goes down. It's, oh my God, after a great win, we have to go back into the dumpster again. And finally, fortunately, they're able to pull out one today. A roller coaster of emotions. I know I was on the edge of my seat that last game today. So I'll get your thoughts on that in just a moment. But to answer your question specifically, I mean, it's odd because I think both Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett, both of them battled against a really good Baltimore Orioles team. Both of them had a quality start in that game. But honestly, I think my biggest takeaway was that the offense seems kind of watchable. And it was only 4 games, but they had a pulse. I mean, like, obviously, if you look at the amount of runs they scored, I think it was 18, 19 or something like that over the 4-game set, which is solid. You know, it's close to 5 a game. Right. Had a lot of hits, had a lot of opportunities missed with runners in scoring position, a lot of walks. So I don't know about you, but I think that I'm cautiously optimistic about this offense. Still not quite enough power as you'd like, but definitely some good at-bats, some quality at-bats. And I'm highlighting your guy, Andres Jimenez. So long-winded answer of saying I'm happy baseball is back. What are your thoughts?
I'm also happy baseball is back, but of course we have to start with a classic Toronto Blue Jays start to the first series of the year where we go through the emotions like you said. We are on the edge of our seat. We don't have any home runs from all the big names on our team, and we win 2 games because of pitching and defense. So that was the classic Toronto Blue Jays of this era. We've won the last 5 opening days, so I'm with you. Maybe it was time to switch things up. Who cares if you lose game 1 if you go on to have a great rest of your 161. Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett both, like you said, pitched, I would say, similar outings, doing it the way that they know best. Chris Bassett specifically today, what a start when we absolutely needed it. We have no room for error when it comes to managing that bullpen. That's continuing into the National Series as we have no off days in between. So, and then Kevin Gausman just doing what Kevin Gausman does. Just classic starts. The offense, despite the fact that we didn't get any big home runs from any of the big names.
Two from the cleanup hitter. You got to mention that.
Yeah. My guy, Andres Jimenez, I will happily discuss in detail in a moment. But I do want to mention this because I think it's a stat that should shock a lot of Blue Jays fans if you look at just the statistics of these 4 games. The number one thing that I looked for, and I found out today, 48 hard hit balls over the first 4 games of the year. Talk about positive regression. Vladdy specifically hit the ball all over the ballpark because, and I would say even Bo batted .467 in these first 4 games, and he should have had more because of how many hard hit balls he had that turned into outs. And Vladdy, same thing. Today, almost had a home run that would have been like a dagger in today's game, but just at the wall because he got it off just the end of the bat, but another hard hit ball that turned into an out. Does that stat surprise you?
To be honest with you, not really, because it did seem like they were spraying the ball all across the yard. I mean, the thing is that how much of that is an indictment on an Orioles pitching staff, which by the way looks very questionable. They're not going anywhere with that pitching staff. I'll say that right now. I know this is not an Orioles pod, but they got a lot of work to do in that regard. Not that the Blue Jays don't, because obviously we have ghosts in our own home too. We all are aware of those. But I thought, like you mentioned, it was it was a pulse there. Obviously Vladdy, you look at the stats from this series, it didn't look overly impressive, but I thought he hit a lot of hard hit balls to right center. He had one today that obviously went to the warning track. It was a splitter from Sagano that he didn't quite get enough of. I think the at-bats are good. I think he's missed a few pitches. He chased a bit yesterday in the game yesterday, and like that. But ultimately, I think I like what I've seen from Vlad. I think the process is right there. I think that it's only a matter of time. Keegan even tweeted it. It's only a matter of time before he hits one to the moon, and I concur with that 100% based on the at-bats. And even George Springer, I think that it's so important to see him have a pulse. He had a big game today, obviously. That big hit that ended up being the deciding factor, though. That little bloop shot into center that scored 2 runs in the first inning. And then that ball that I thought was gone in that 9th inning that went all the way to the wall, off the wall. In Friday's game, too, I think he had a ball 109 off the bat that died at the warning track again. So, I mean, that's obviously great to see. Great to see George have a pulse. I mean, don't want to get too excited because if you remember last year in that opening series against Tampa, he had 2 bombs, and then we thought, oh, is positive regression there, and obviously it wasn't. But I'll say what it didn't surprise me. I thought that they put together a worthy offensive performance. I thought that there was a lot of good things I take away from a 4-game vacuum series.
Right, exactly. George Springer, specifically, 364 over the first 4 games this year. We can get any version of a competent Springer in the 6-7 hole this year.
Oh yeah, you take it.
He will play every day, and that's fine. We'll happily take that. But the lineup did read this through the first 4 games. Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Anthony Santander, and what surprised everybody on opening day was Andres Gimenez batting cleanup.
Yep.
I think, personally, that is completely because Dalton Varsho had to start the year on the IL. But then Andres Gimenez hits a home run on opening day, we lose. He hits a home run in game 3, we lose. So the fact that we're not going to get many games where Andres Gimenez hits home runs this year, and the first 2 we lose those games is, I think, quite ironic. But I think when Dalton Varsho comes back, he is going to slot right into that cleanup spot, regardless of how good Andres Gimenez is going to be. What we did get to see is that maybe we can have a guy there that doesn't fit the typical prototype, just given the fact that the top 3 is so good and might be so good the rest of the way, that maybe the 4 we can lose some power on the 4 spot just to get those guys who get on base in the top 3 of our order in. If we just get a guy that knocks guys in, then that's all that really matters. RBI technically is the more important stat for the cleanup hitter than actual home runs. So you just obviously get more when you put the ball over the fence yourself. But I didn't hate it, especially given the options. Like you can't sit here and tell me that, oh, Alejandro Kirk would have been a much better spot for your 4-hitter. Oh, George Springer, just because he had a bad year, we had to start him in the 4th spot. No, I think you go with your best hitter, and I think to start the year, the Jays had the most confidence in Andres Gimenez being one of their 4 best hitters. What did you think?
Yeah, I think the convention, the lineup where you have your first 2 hitters are like the speedy on base guys, and you have your sluggers in the middle. I think that's slowly dying, and I think that fans are starting to realize that baseball being the analytical game that it's become, everything's by the book, by the numbers. You just want your best hitters hitting as high in the order as possible, and that's why I have no problem with them going that 1, 2, 3. Bo, Vladdy, Santander. There was a lot of discourse of whether you should maybe stick Will Wagner or someone else in that top that leadoff spot just to make the lineup a little longer. I think that when you don't have a lineup that is not going to hit a lot of home runs, a lot of pop, you just want your best hitters going up there as often as possible to maximize it that way. And yeah, I completely agree with that point. That at this point, given the current configuration of the lineup, Andres Gimenez was a safe bet for the cleanup hitter. And despite him looking really good, great first impression, by the way, with the bat and with the glove, obviously, we know that he adds a lot of value there. But I don't think there's anyone who can argue that that's going to be a long-term option for them. Hitting cleanup. That's going to be the cleanup hitter for the rest of the year. I mean, I hope that he hits well enough where all of a sudden that becomes a conversation. But his career suggests that likely he will regress to a point where you'll want someone else up there. And I think that ultimately the hope is that some of the 4A guys, either an Alan Roden, a Will Wagner, who knows, maybe George Springer, if this is legit, I think that eventually they're going to move up in the order, whether that's in the cleanup specifically or higher up, maybe 1, 2 in that regard. That'll move Jimenez down. I think that's how they're going to go about it. But yeah, I would say great first impression so far. Specifically, defensively, that last play in the ninth inning. Not the last play, but the first hitter. I think it was Urias in the ninth inning. A ball that went right up the middle, and great for him to range over and get him out. That's a big first out right there, because all of a sudden now you guarantee Adley Rutschman hits in that inning, and who knows? You get the leadoff guy on, the wheels start spiraling. That was a big play. Great first impression from Andres, despite the fact that I still would say he's not going to be the cleanup hitter moving forward. Like maybe in the near future, but ultimately long term, yeah, I think that's temporary.
Yeah, I think it ends the second the Dalton Varsho returns to the
Possible
to the lineup. But yeah, Andres Gimenez, I'm claiming him. He's my guy this year. If all things go accordingly, I'm going to end up with an Andres Gimenez jersey at the end of the year, because I think that he will return closer to his 2022 All-Star form. Finally, on the offense, before we move on to back to the pitching side, the other big story from the opening series, which will be Scherzer, we'll get into it. But Bo Bichette, we might not believe entirely in the George Springer start.
Yeah.
But I think we can kind of believe more in the Bo Bichette start, which is 467 and 1,100 OPS, I think, or well over 1,000 OPS to start the year. No home runs yet, and like we said, hard hit balls that did end up in outs, so it could have been better than what that stat line currently says. What'd you think of Bo through 4?
I think Bo's a great player who's gonna have a great year. I think it's just simply it's just that simple. It's just really that simple, man. I think that we've come accustomed. You obviously have that Barrios outlier year, that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. outlier year. But if you think of the conversation that we were having about Bo Bichette at this time last year, it was he's the model of consistency. He's a guy that for the last half decade is you can plug him in there, top of your order. He'll hit close to 300 with an OPS plus, close to 130. He'll hit 25 plus bombs and be a 4 to 5 win player for you. And last year, obviously, he had the outlier year. He had a rough year where he was in the IL 3 different times. And, obviously, you get off to a bad start. You get off to a start where you're not all completely right. And then that starts spiraling. That starts, making an impact on you the rest of the way. But yeah, I think that the safe bet was always that Bo Bichette's going to have an incredible year. Obviously, the Blue Jays are confident that he's starting the year hitting leadoff, and rightfully so, because he's been outstanding through the first series of the year. I think that we'll look at that season, that 2024 season, at the back of his baseball card when his career is over, or heck, next half decade, whatever. And yeah, that'll be a consensus outlier, like we do with Jose Barrios now when we talk about that 2022 season. So I'm completely buying it. I think he's gonna have a monster year, like we all predicted in our season preview pod.
Right. What you didn't mention, surprisingly, this time last year, not were we just talking about how consistent Bo Bichette was, we were talking about the fact that he should be paid over Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Right.
That world still actually exists this time next year. So Jays fans, just beware that we might be having that same conversation at the end of 2025. Okay, the other big story that we have to get to before we go any further, and that is Max Scherzer hits the IL, pitched 3 innings in his first big Jays debut, and it's because of the thumb. And not directly this time, but it is, he said, 100% correlated to the thumb that he's been dealing with for the last 2 years. He officially went out with right lat soreness, but apparently today we found out that going into the start, he had already mentioned to Pete that he was a bit sore on that side, but he was going to try to pitch through it. And after 3 innings, he said a more definitive statement, which was, "We are in imminent danger if I continue to pitch through this game." So he pulled himself out of the game and then hits the 15-day IL, which means he will miss at least 2 starts before he makes another start for the Toronto Blue Jays. You could be anywhere on this scale of panic. We did the show right after the game today, our first post-game show on Blue Jays Center, and we had guys in the 8 out of 10 panic. We had guys in the 4 to 5 because of the circumstances right now in the panic. I want to know where you sit on the panic meter, 1 to 10, when it comes to Max Scherzer going forward.
Well, when it comes to Max Scherzer directly, and we can have I'm sure we'll get into a more debate on the rest, on how they handled it roster-wise coming into last start and obviously coming into the season. I'm sure we'll have some discourse about that shortly, but I would say it's pretty high. Meaning, like, the reason why I think it's that, because, well, one, I think that your next option is TBD. I'd imagine it's going to be a piggyback Yariel Rodriguez, Easton Lucas type of game. That's going to be what they do the next time the Scherzer slot comes across. But ultimately, just knowing Max Scherzer, and obviously knowing him not, in our own backyard, this is the first time he's been a Blue Jay, but the last half decade, the last decade and a half of his Hall of Fame career. This is a guy who likes to compete. This is not a guy who, you have to take the ball out of his own hands. And the fact that
Right.
he personally came up and said, yeah, like this is going to be a disaster if I keep pitching, that concerns me. And the fact that he's been dealing with this all spring training long, the last couple of years he's been on the IL, in and out. It's hard to imagine that at age 41 he'll be able to. I mean, I don't want to say bounce back and be competent for the Blue Jays, but I can't imagine that this won't be a reoccurring issue going the rest of the year, regardless of when/if he comes back. And maybe that's a little morbid because it's only a 15-day IL, so hopefully he'll be back sooner rather than later after those 15 days are up. But yeah, I would say it's pretty high. And unfortunately, as excited as we were for Max Scherzer, and rightfully so, because anytime you have a chance to have a first ballot Hall of Famer come and play for your organization, that definitely brings a breath of fresh air and definitely exciting for not only the young guys on the team, but for the fans as well. But this was the risk with signing a 41-year-old with a injury plagued last few years. And unfortunately, that injury snake bite came pretty early, a lot earlier than most fans would have anticipated or expected or wanted for that matter.
Right.
So I would say my without giving an actual number, I'd say it's pretty high, man.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
about
and
you?
we didn't like. I'm kind of right there with you, and
Yeah.
for a lot of the same reasons, but mainly because we didn't pay 15.5 million for Max Scherzer to
Yeah.
be a bench coach. You know what I mean? Like,
15.5 million. That's you're hoping to get a 2-win pitcher,
right. That's
right?
not that's certainly not nothing. You're expecting
Yeah.
15 starts out of him this year.
Well, at least, yeah.
At least, and you're expecting those to be good, and especially the fact that you started the year saying that Max Scherzer is going to be our third best pitcher this year. You set the rotation. You said he's starting Game 3. You said he's going to be a guy that you choose over Chris Bassett. Like, that's the decision that you made, and then he gets you 3 innings, and it's because of the same old with him, which is I think the worst case scenario. Like, when it came out right lat soreness, you were like, okay,
Oh yeah,
well,
at least on the thumb, yeah.
maybe it might not be the thumb, and then obviously he confirmed that it was 100% the thumb, which is like
Yeah.
worst case scenario.
So,
And
Professor,
because we don't know what to do now, kind of
yes,
like
yes.
we literally we will go back to what we had to deal with when Alek Manoah went down, which is okay. Every 5 days we have to just figure it out. Like, is it
Yeah.
going to be Real Rodriguez? Is it going to be Easton Lucas? Are we just going to have a bullpen day? How soon do we have to bring up Jake Bloss? How soon do we have to try out a different AAA star that we've never heard of before? Like, that, all those conversations are going to happen if we have to continue dealing with this Max Scherzer thing. And here, okay, fine, we'll get into
Professor,
it. So,
yeah, well, I was gonna pitch it to you. I was gonna say that in light of this, I know you were a guy who didn't think that the obviously DFAing Ryan Yarbrough for that last roster spot was the wrong move. You thought it was the right move to cut ties with him, and ultimately he's now a New York Yankee. We know that, but do you have reservations on that take now in light of this, in hindsight?
so, okay, what's the best? So, I'm not going to sit here and spend a lot of energy on having Ryan Yarbrough be our long man this year, because I think that there's 1,000 Ryan Yarbroughs that we could find, and I think that the 1.2 WAR that Ryan Yarbrough might put up as a New York Yankee, like he's put up the most of his career in the big leagues, that I think we can find 1.2 WAR over the course of 162 games with whether it's Mason Fluharty or Easton Lucas or Yairo Rodriguez or any of those guys. I think at the end of the year, when we look at it, we will have gotten a WAR out of the long man in our rotation at the end of the year, which is why I'm not going to concern myself over a guy who doesn't strike anybody out, and the best thing he's known for is he just doesn't get hit hard, which in the AL East specifically, which he will continue to pitch in, and we will perfectly have whether or not I was right or wrong about this Ryan Yarbrough thing throughout the course of the year, because we're going to see it. He's going to pitch in the AL East. Is that you can't rely on a guy who doesn't touch, who can't strike guys out and can't miss bats. You can't rely on that guy. You just simply can't. Not in today's game, not in today's society. So that's why I don't care about missing out on Ryan Yarbrough. Like, for example, the guy that we brought up now instead of Richard Lovelady, like, is Mason Fluharty, who, guess what, in the minors has 172 Ks in 140 innings. Ryan Yarbrough can't say that. He at no level of his professional baseball career can he say he was over a K per 9 and well over a K per 9 in his professional baseball career, which is why I think I would way rather take the upside on a bunch of no names over what you know you're going to get out of Ryan Yarbrough, which maybe I'm wrong for thinking that, but when we're talking about the 8th man in your pen or the 7th man in your pen, I would much rather take guys with upside.
Uh, first of all, first point, Mason Fluharty. We went to Buffalo last year, and I spoke to Bison's catcher Nick Raposo at the time. He mentioned that Mason Fluharty had the best stuff on the Bison staff, and that was in August last year. So that's just a little nugget there about Mason Fluharty. Who knows? Maybe he could be something. And I'll be honest. First, full disclosure. I did not have this strong of a Ryan Yarbrough opinion until the game yesterday. So you can call me, hindsight 2020, whatever. And look, I planned up. I did that. I wasn't one of the first people on the Ryan Yarbrough island. But I think the counter to what you're saying is, it's not necessarily that you can replace that roster spot production from Ryan Yarbrough in terms of tangible success. But I think if you look at that game yesterday, and obviously when Max Scherzer came out in the third inning there, you were stuck with Richard Lovelady and Jacob Barnes, which, I mean, at that point, game over, right? And that's exactly what happened. Like, that lead didn't last for long. But what also happened is that you now had to use Yimi Garcia and Jeff Hoffman in the game, not because you wanted to get them work, but because you didn't have anybody else. There was nobody else that could pitch that game, which in my opinion is bad planning, especially considering that you could have foreseen a Max Scherzer injury. He'd been dealing with them all spring. So I think that was bad planning to have that. And look, if you look at the game today, credit to Brendan Little and Yariel Rodriguez for coming in and putting up zeros in both the 7th and the 8th. That was huge, a big part of the win. But I mean, you're telling me that there wasn't a scenario where they blew that game? I mean, I was definitely thinking about it. And all of a sudden now you now have a trickle-down effect of that decision, of not having a guy go in and give you 3 innings yesterday and preserve your bullpen. It ended up working out, but I think it's still process over results. And also, here's one other point that I saw today. And obviously, it's just one start, but Yariel Rodriguez was touching 97, 98. I mean, he's the guy who touched 100 in Japan. Like, you saw that slider that he threw to Jackson Holiday, got him swinging on it. That was some nice stuff. I mean, is it out of the question that Yariel Rodriguez can be a viable late inning reliever for you? I mean, all of a sudden that can help unlock something at the end of that bullpen. I mean, the stuff plays, right? You look at the high end fastball, the slider there. I mean, obviously only one outing, so a long way to go for that. But all of a sudden now you've mouse-holed him into that long man role. And all of a sudden now you take away his opportunity to be a late inning guy. You could have had both Ryan Yarbrough and Yariel Rodriguez on this roster instead of Jacob Barnes. And then Yariel Rodriguez could have been your late inning guy. We saw him today. I mean, that he had a hold in the 8th inning that I would never expect Jacob Barnes to have at any point this season. And now you also could have had your long man as well. So in hindsight, I do think it was a wrong move. I do think it was a wrong move based on what we've seen so far for the first series of the year. And obviously, very early, still a long way to go. But I think that so far, I don't know, Prof. I understand what you're saying, but I don't know.
So I can agree that maybe Richard Lovelady wasn't the answer, but I don't think that Richard Lovelady takes that spot yesterday the rest of the year. I think Yariel Rodriguez...
Well, obviously not. He's gone now.
No. I'm talking about specifically yesterday. I'm saying if that same scenario happens ever again, I assume Yariel Rodriguez is getting that start and getting that spot because he pitched 36 innings or 36 pitches on day 1 of the season, and they weren't good. So we have to factor that in. His stuff doesn't always play. He has stuff that can play, but I wouldn't put a blanket on it that it plays because it just doesn't play.
Wouldn't you rather go with the upside? I mean, we saw what happened today. Like in my opinion, what happened today, I don't think you're ever getting that at any point this season from Jacob Barnes.
Yesterday, if Yariel Rodriguez was available, he's the guy that goes in that spot. Richard Lovelady doesn't see the field until you're in a garbage time game. My problem, though, is that because he was unavailable, we now have to have a discourse about Ryan Yarbrough, which I don't think is going to matter in the slightest. And if we're actually spending any energy on it, then I think that we're worried about the wrong things in this team. And if you are worried about that thing, then you shouldn't have any expectations on this team. You shouldn't have playoff expectations if you're worried about whether or not we should have kept Ryan Yarbrough on the team. If Yariel goes yesterday and has a better outing, like he's probably going to have the rest of the way, or simply doesn't blow the game like Richard Lovelady did, then we don't have this discussion today, and that's why I don't think that we should have had it at all, regardless of that. The late inning thing. No, I really hope that Rodriguez never becomes a late inning guy this year because I think that his only value is in a long man or 5th starter option. and that's what the Jays paid him to be, because his stuff just so far in his sample size of the big leagues isn't good enough to rely on in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. And we have guys that we can. Jeff Hoffman, Chad Green, and Jimmy Garcia should be able to hold that down the entire way. Obviously, this isn't this isn't cookie cutter, but Yael Rodriguez should only see the game in the 6th or 7th inning, or the odd start in favor of Max Scherzer.
But my point, and obviously this is kind of moot now, because I do think that we will see Yael Rodriguez have to be a long inning guy because Max Scherzer's hurt now. But like, I don't know. I think that Ryan Yarbrough could have been the Yael Rodriguez of long relief, and I think Yael Rodriguez could have been the Jacob Barnes of the 1 inning guy that can go out there in an emergency situation. Obviously, not relying on him to pitch the 7th, 8th, or 9th in a regular vacuum, but like today, when you didn't have anyone available, you got the job done. So I mean, again, it's I think it's a moot point now, because now he has, like, there's no choice. He has to go out there and pitch multiple innings because you just don't have anybody else. And Scherzer did get hurt, so I do agree. I think it's a granular convo. However, because it is the first 4 games and we need content, we're definitely going to go out there and have a discourse about it. But I think that's where we should couch it, Prof.
Here's my prediction. Ryan Yarbrough is available again before the end of the year for free. For free.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
On to way more important things with the team that exists in the 26-man roster of the Toronto Blue Jays. The top of the order. Anthony Santander, I'm going to point him out because we said Vladdy had a bunch of hard hit balls that didn't get down. Bo Bichette was great. And then so that leaves Anthony Santander, the biggest acquisition in the offseason, 44 home runs last year. Only Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge outdid him in the big leagues last year. Hasn't looked great. He's obviously batting 200 through 4 games, and not, I wouldn't say, a lot of hard hit balls. I think if we counted the balls he hit foul, then maybe we could say it was a bit better than what the stat line suggests. But we don't count those ones. So through 4 games, what are you thinking about with Tony?
It sucks that this is the answer because it's so true, and yet it makes for awful content. But it's early, man. It's early, man, and it's always a thing, you know, when a big acquisition goes to a new team, when there's expectations, there's always going to be a little added pressure. I mean, obviously, if you recall 2 years ago with Dalton Varsho, that clearly affected him. But 4 games against his former team, I'm not going to make too much into it. I do think that power definitely plays. I mean, 44 home runs, you don't just do that, you know, rolling out of bed. Yeah, right.
In this economy.
Yeah, exactly. When it's like hard to hit home runs unless you're the Yankees and Rob Manfred lets you use fucking whatever.
Another thing we're not spending. Another thing we're not spending time on today.
Yes. Correct. We're not. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a boring answer, but I have a lot of faith in Tony that he'll have a great year this year. That he'll be a 125 plus OPS plus guy, hit a bunch of bombs, and I'm not going to put too much stock in the first series of the year. 4 games, what is that? Not even 20 plate appearances. So. Right. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Had he hit 3 home runs and hit 500, I would have said yes. What a great start! This is very indicative of what the rest of the season is going to look like. But yeah, I think the measure take, and look, that wouldn't have been the measure take either had I said that. It would have been just better for content. But yeah, I think it's early. I'll maintain that position for now.
Yeah, that, like, I would say almost without the actual results, like without him hitting a home run in the first 4 games, this is what this guy is. Like, this is what you want in the big leagues, and what people just simply can't seem to understand is a guy who strikes out a lot, but when he doesn't strike out, he puts the ball over the fence, and he's going to win you a lot of games because of that. Yep. So Anthony Santander specifically is a guy that over the course of the year, you're going to have to take him in significantly larger samples because
exactly. And
isolating these guys isn't how this works for them. Yeah.
No, exactly. And I think that what we saw this weekend, it was encouraging them going, you know, base hit, walk, hit by pitch, station to station. Exactly. But the reality is that works against, you know, 41-year-old Charlie Morton and this guy Sugano who made his big league debut. When you're facing, you know, in a few weeks, obviously you're not going to face Garrett Cole, but like, let's say like a Tarek Skubal or like Garrett Crochet for the Red Sox, like that's going to be, you know, those are high-end pitchers that like, that's not going to work. It's not going to cut it. You're going to need a masher who's going to go out there and hopefully he hits a bomb with a couple guys on base, and that should be enough for you to win that game. That's the formula. That's how teams win in the playoffs. It's not base hit. Like that's the reality is that unfortunately, the Blue Jays don't have enough Anthony Santanders, enough guys with that kind of home run upside. So, yeah, I definitely think that over the course of 162, you'll see Tony hit a lot of big home runs for the Jays. Hopefully, you know, start soon.
Yeah, exactly. this isn't the top of the order correlated, but it's guys who might find their way there. It is
Yep.
Alan Roden and Will Wagner both got the call up to the big leagues to start the year, and they both have shown that the Jays at least are going to give them everyday spots, like we
Definitely
wanted them to, and
Yep.
they looked good. They looked good in different aspects. Like they got obviously good bat to ball skills, but their defense also plays in the bigs, and I think that's what's going to keep them in the everyday slots. What'd you think for those two guys to start the year?
Yeah, a lot of what you said. I thought there were a lot of flashes on both sides of the ball. Obviously, that Friday game specifically, where Alan Roden had the diving catch and Will Wagner had that. I can't remember who the Orioles hitter was. Was it Adley? I can't remember. It was a hot shot to third base that he
Right.
and threw it over to first. Great stretch by Vladdy there. There were
Yeah.
questions on how Will Wagner specifically would fit. How his defense would play at third base, but ultimately, you look at the projections. There are a lot of projections that have Will Wagner being a 100 plus WRC plus guy. I mean, that is a legitimately above average hitter. And if you can do that on a semi everyday basis, then there you go. Right away, we have that over under. Can you have
Right.
one guy who can be a semi everyday player, be a well above average hitter for you? And so far, both Roden and Will Wagner have shown flashes that they're capable. And obviously, look, it's for Alan Roden specifically, it's been 4 games. Well, technically 3 because he didn't play yesterday and start yesterday. So it's tough. It's tough to like have him go out and hit the ground running. He had couple hits. He had a hit on opening day and a hit today, an infield single today. So not a whole lot to laud about when it comes to his offense, but I definitely think that the eye plays. He can definitely identify whether a pitch is a ball or a strike, which is a huge advantage at the big league level. And yeah, I think his minor league numbers speak for themselves that he can definitely get it around to balls. That being said, we'll have to see because look at the other side. Jackson Holiday being the number 1 prospect in baseball last year and how long it took for him to kind of figure it out. I mean, it's not out of the question that it takes these guys a bit of a while to become established big leaguers, but I definitely like the potential for sure. How about you?
I really like the fact that we're going to get to see it, that they have a leash.
Yep.
The Jays starting them 3 to 4 games to start the year is phenomenal to see.
Yep.
And it means that they are very open to the idea of one of those guys just taking over and earning an everyday spot, if not both of them earning an everyday spot
Yep.
the rest of the way. So it'll be very interesting when Dalton Varsho is ready to come off the IL and make his 2025 season debut, because that lineup will look a lot different with him in it if those two guys are also in it and clicking. So that's a very lengthy lineup if all those guys at the bottom of the order are clicking, which is obviously what we're looking for. Okay,
Absolutely.
to finish things off, we got to go into the National Series, which is the next up. No off days in between. We start that tomorrow night at home again, hosting the Nationals. But here's the thing with the Nationals. People obviously over the last few years are going to assume that this should be, a Jays sweep or a Jays series win. And while I can agree that it should be a Jays series win, this team is on the way up. They got a lot of top prospects that are playing in their system right now on the 26-man roster. And then Mackenzie Gore, their ace to start the year, had finally a breakout outing for him, a guy that was regarded as the top prospect, and he put up I think it was 11 Ks or something like that in his first start this year. So I don't know, and we're going to see him, I think, to start game 2.
Game 2, yeah. You're right.
So here's the thing. This is another series that isn't going to be easy to win, and it goes into our hard schedule, but we have Bowden Francis starting game 1, Jose Barrios going game 2, and Kevin Gausman going game 3. So we have the guys in place that can go out there, give us 6 innings, give us a quality start. As long as the bats give us something on the other end, we can come out with a series win, if not a sweep. What are you thinking heading into this National Series?
Yeah, kind of like what you said there, that obviously, I don't care who you're playing. I mean, maybe, there's some special circumstances where you have a 2024 White Sox, so teams like that. Yeah, that you can say, okay, if we don't sweep, it's disappointing, but that's just not how baseball works. I mean, even the best teams, the Dodgers are probably going to lose 2 to 3 times a week. You know what I mean?
Right.
And in those 2 to 3 times a week, they're going to play subpar competition and lose to them. So going out there and expecting a sweep, that's definitely not the right mindset there. Series wins is what you want to do. You want to stack up series wins, especially in a series where you have in theory, your top 2 pitchers going with Jose Barrios, I think he will bounce back after a rough opening day start. I definitely think that what we saw on Thursday is not going to be indicative of the pitcher he'll be for the rest of the season. His career would suggest strongly with that take. Kevin Gausman obviously going, and even Bowden Francis. I'm kind of curious to see how he does. Obviously, we saw last year how being he was the best pitcher in baseball for 2 months or something like that, with all those no-hit bids going into like the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings multiple times last year. Obviously, he's not going to be that pitcher again for this season, but can he be somewhat comparative to a league average starter? And if that's your fourth guy, you're very content with that. We saw a lot of good things last year, so hopefully that continues against the Nationals tomorrow. But yeah, I'm expecting a series win. I definitely think that you should at the very least expect a series win for sure. Sweep would be very nice, but definitely going to be a very tall task. And I think that you should definitely not expect that. But a series win 2 out of 3, yeah, I think that's definitely within the realm of possibilities. And what the Jays should do, because if you take a look ahead after this National series, it's pretty much a gauntlet for the rest of April, right? So regardless of what you think of the Nationals, if you think they're a team on the uprise, they're certainly a less known commodity than the teams that you're going to be facing coming up. So you better get wins. You better get a couple wins against this team for sure.
Yeah, we said in the season preview podcast on here that we needed to come out of these two series 4-3 at the minimum.
That was the goal. That was the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, heading into a road trip and a gauntlet of one. Bowden Francis is 100%, I would say, the X factor of this rotation coming into the year. Is the guy we saw at the end of last year someone who we can potentially see this year? Not at that level, obviously. Expecting a quasi ace is not what Bowden Francis is going to be. But the Jays going into the year slotted him in the 5th spot, so they think he's their fifth best pitcher, and that is even with what happened last year. So that is probably a better indication on where you should expect Bowden Francis to be, is right around our 4th or 5th best starter. But we especially now, we need to make sure that he is that. We need to make sure that he is a serviceable guy that can go every 5 days and give you 5 innings, 6 innings of just decent baseball, 3 runs, 4 runs, and giving you a chance to win every 5 days. And that's going to be huge. Berrios, obviously, we expect to have a bounce back. And then Gausman, hopefully, with the fact that he's had a full spring training, didn't start late this year, and has got the velocity back up. Very winnable series, and very possible that we do get the sweep if Bowden Francis is anything close to what he was at the end of last year. So I think that's good. I think we've covered everything today for 4 games through the year. Putting up 35 minutes on 4 games of content, I think is pretty good. So
absolutely,
we will.
And we're doing we're doing 2 pods a week, right? So we definitely got to space out our content as well for sure. So I definitely think that we did a good job of diving into the opening series of the year, which, by the way, I think fans should be happy with. I think that splitting this series and given all those external factors you mentioned at the top of the show, I think fans should be feeling a little as bullish as you can for the first 4 games of the season.
Yeah, I think for a team that's going to compete for a wild card spot, these first 4 games shouldn't give you any indication that that is no longer true. 48 hard hit balls, like we said, I'll just sum up the big points of the podcast today. 48 hard hit balls through 4 games, 19 runs through 4 games. Alan Roden and Will Wagner looking like they can be everyday guys. Bo Bichette off to a hot start, and Kevin Gausman looking like Kevin Gausman, old Kevin Gausman. I think those are all things that should, again, just lead to mid-80s in wins. So which is, we're looking to compete for a wild card spot. There's no different at the end of 4 games. Thank you, Rob. James Price is on vacation right now. He should be back for our next podcast, which should be coming to you guys on Wednesday after the National Series. Thank you, Rob. I was Cole Whiston. You are watching the Sick Podcast Network with Blue Jays Center, and we will see you guys next time.
Cheers, guys.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Blue Jays Center on YouTube, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.